time to move on to the next plenary session, headed by Dr. R. Vasuhi, Assistant Professor and Head of the Department of English, Manoromaram University, Tirunelveli, Tamil Nadu, India. Now I invite Dr. Amal J. Eronimus, Secretary, International Tamil Development Trust, Nahakoil, Tamil Nadu, India, to introduce the Dr. R. Vasuhi. Welcome, sir.
Very good
Hello.
morning, Vasi
Good
ma'am.
morning. Nice to see you.
Yo, thank you. A very, very lovely and charming personality, Dr. Vasi. I'm very elated to talk about Vasi. A charming personality in the university, we could say that. And when we think about Dr. Vasi, she was a multi-talented person. We remember Vasi ma'am was rocking as a scholar, as a multi-talented person, as a dancer, as a speaker, a great orator, winning medals and trophies to her house and to the colleges where she served. She's really a great thinker. Why I say thinker, I could see, because I know her personally. Even I have taken my students to MS University to have inter-college, literary thought sharing, where she shared her experiences with the children, exposed, and the students were highly enlightened. And they could even say, sir, why can't we invite her to our institute and have some enchanting hours with. But of course, this is how Dr. Vasugi is the person who spends time with the scholars, and she has produced more than, she has published more than 20 articles in reputed journals, and of course in books also. And she projects about the black African women writers, and her writings also go in UGC model magazines. I would say, like, Vasugi ma'am is more a book than a reputed scholar, because I could see she is spending time with the scholars, hours and hours, sitting home, reading the books word by word, giving them corrections. She is a real role model to students there in the university. I could see the scholars coming and hugging her, going with her, handing with her, sharing with a cup of tea. My God, excellent. And Vasugi ma'am has number of scholars like Dr. Dunstan, Dr. Benison, and Dr. Balasubramaniam. She discusses with number of thinkers and scholars. That is actually a real attitude of a thinker. A thinker doesn't stay with herself or himself, expands the thought, waiting for the words of others to be shared to them. And that's what we are going to find today from Vasugi ma'am. And she's going to rock today. And ma'am, you're welcome. And the children
Thank you,
are
sir.
longing to hear your wonderful words. And this morning also we discussed with Dr. Jocelyn and Andrew about your personal lifestyle of enchantment. And this enchantment we want in an intellectual manner today. Welcome you, ma'am.
Thank you so much for the nice words, Dr. Amal. Thank you so much. Feeling elated. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, sure.
So, very good morning to one and all present here. I thank God for making this day happen. And this is a wonderful day for me because I'm sharing my knowledge, my ideas about. I had a good opportunity of sharing my knowledge with scholars, students, and staff present in this forum. I thank the organizers of Anne Velankanni College, the Research Department of English, Anne Velankanni College. Special thanks to Dr. Jocelyn. And I also thank Dr. Regine Silvest of Cape Comorin Trust and the Lavender Literary Club. And also, I thank the organizers of the International Tamil Development Trust for giving me this wonderful opportunity. And today I'm here to talk about post-colonial feminism. So, being a woman, I always have an interest in feminism. And always between women's movement and feminism, there is a close link, and both these inspire and enrich each other. And when we talk about feminism, it means the main focus of feminism is the concern that it has for women's subordinate status in society, and also to voice against the various discriminations encountered by women because of their sex. So these feminism all strive to change the social, economic, political, or cultural order to reduce this kind of discrimination, gender discrimination, and to create an equitable society where gender justice is achieved. So today, when we see, we find that women have a lot of legal and state provisions, privileges, and women are educated, and there is a lot of advancements in science and technology, where there is cloning of genes, then medical advancements, longevity is there, we fight against disease, everything is there, and women are given their space in all such fields. And so we may even claim that today feminism has no relevance in today's society because women enjoy all kinds of freedom. But one must remember that even 100 years ago, these women didn't have any rights, not even the right to vote. They didn't have any legal privileges. They were discouraged to work outside. And and at the domestic level also, they had to face many challenges and violence. So, but today we have a lot of educated women. Many CEOs are there. Major multinational companies, the CEOs are women. But and also in political field there are women, but still women face many blocks, many challenges that men do not in these areas. So even in workspace, they have to face many challenges. Girl children are not safe. And even in today's news, today in the newspapers and in media, we find how many women are sexually abused and they are not safe, exploited in all ways. So, so we may say that even though women are educated, even though there are a lot of legal protection for women, women still suffer, and so something has to be done. For example, one example is Mrs. Sarah Palin, who was campaigning for her vice presidency, was severely criticized because she didn't focus on her family and children. Because her daughter had an unplanned pregnancy and her son was mentally challenged. And since she was focusing on her vice presidency and not focusing on her family, she was severely criticized. But if it was a man in the same place, it would not have happened. So she's a very powerful lady, well educated, and forward-thinking woman. So such women also face all kinds of criticism. So women will encounter all kinds of challenges, but still feminists solve all the problems. So we can say that feminism is not just a concern for women's issues, but it makes women understand their power, and they will also start questioning the dominance that is centered in patriarchy, in the male dominated society, and they will voice their justice and sustainability. So for all these things, for example, there is always a dominance. Okay, there is a hierarchy in the structure of society in our lives. When men always dominate over women, white people dominate over non-whites, rich people dominate the poor, and the first world dominates the third world. So if only we can change this power structure, if only we can treat each other in a way, in a just way, maybe even the domination of the human over non-human will also will be broken. So there will be a kind of understanding between the human and non-human. Here I'm talking about, our environment and human beings. Even now, no human beings, they don't have any concern for the environment or nature, as we call. So this problem also can be solved if only we can understand and treat each other in a proper or positive way. That is, men over women, white over non-whites, rich over poor, all the binaries. It can be, if there is a proper communication, even the human non-human bridge also will be gapped. So now I just wanted to focus the whole post-colonial feminism applies to all the colonial regions. I thought I would rather focus to South Asian region, where India is one country. Okay, South Asian region country. The countries that comprises the South Asian region are India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Nepal, Bhutan, Maldives, and the Indian Ocean territories, which were colonized by the British. And 1/5 of the world population also constitutes the South Asian region. So we have a rich, diverse culture with diverse beliefs and different heritages. Okay, so when they all came under the colonial rule, they were influenced by the Western culture, and so there was a lot of conflicts. And when we talk about feminism as such, the post-colonial feminists, they were against the mainstream feminism, because mainstream feminism considered women as a homogeneous group. Okay, women only based on their gender. So as a homogeneous group, regardless of their class, race, culture, religion, and all sorts. So the mainstream feminism didn't talk about these differences. And so post-colonial feminism was a voice against feminism and also against colonialism. And here, so we may say that, so under the colonial rule, there was a lot of conflicts in these regions, and there was political instability. Like example, India and Pakistan, there always conflict between these two countries. So all these things had some kind of an effect. It all affected women in particular in those regions. So in spite of globalization and modernization, the South Indian region, South Asian region, they were upholding their own culture and values, and they over individuals and families. So this is one thing. So when we apply the mainstream feministic ideals on these people, always there is conflict. They do not answer or solve the problems that the women who are belonging to different races and cultures, who face different different kinds of problems, and these are not solved by the mainstream feministic ideals. So if we see the culture of South Asian region, we find that there were joint families, though now they are nuclear families. Always the patriarchy is there, and the family plays a significant role in individuals' life. The family relationships are based on gender, their role, and their status. And here in the family, a woman's role is marginalized. She is subordinated, and male dominance is there. And so, since it is a family-oriented culture, there is always interdependence, and that is valued more than independence. Okay, in Western countries, we see that individuals, they are liberated. They have their
Excuse me, ma'am. Your voice is not audible. You're muted now.
I'm sorry. Thank you, Sherry. So we find that as I'm talking about the joint family system, or even a nuclear family in South Asian region, the family plays a major role, and interdependence is valued more than independence, unlike the Western culture where independence is valued more and family is.
Ma'am, again, you're muted it. Yeah.
I don't know, I didn't mute. Okay. So in this family setup, elders and it is only the male members of the family who are the decision makers, and who will talk about or teach appropriate cultural and individual behavior to the other people in the family. So there is male dominance in family, and it is an accepted norm. So in pre-independent, so now talking about women's movement, so this is the situation in South Asian culture, in South Asian culture in general. So when you talk about pre-independent women's movement in India, actually it started as a social reform in the 19th century, mostly by Rajaram Mohan Roy and others, Rabindranath Tagore, who talked about who were educated and who had exposure to the Western ideals and culture, and they wanted to have no, inspired by the Western. They took women's issues and they wanted to translate them into social reform movement, like the reforms like sati, child marriage. These things were considered as barbaric practices by the Western, and they took this and they tried to solve the problems that affected women in our country. So there was a control of the colonial ideology, but still what happened is they were working on a balance between the traditional values and also the Western ideals. So they exposed or they imbibed the Western ideas and values, and they found that these values, when they intervened with our own culture, with the Indian culture, the indigenous culture, they found that it was destructive, and so they wanted to resist the colonial hegemony by what they called as cultural defense. So they wanted to create a new Indian society where there were modern ideals inspired by the Western thought, and but our society will be deep rooted in our culture and tradition. So this will clear off aberrations like polytheism, polygamy, casteism, sati, child marriage, illiteracy. So all these are considered uh, as practices that impedes the development of women. So these things actually they are destructive to a woman's mental and physical health. So, so the social reformers during this 19th century, they had a common belief that no society could progress if its women were backward. We must have heard, ஒரு நாட்டோட முன்னேற்றம் வந்து பெண்களின் முன்னேற்றத்தை பொறுத்து தான் இருக்கு. This is a saying that we often hear, and this is what happened there. And they all work towards the overall development of women by legislation, political action, and propaganda of education. And they believe that when women were educated, they can empower themselves, and this will it will lead to the development of the society itself. So here sati and child marriage, actually because of child marriage, many girls were not allowed to go to school, and this stopped them from being educated. So these social reformers wanted to take these women out, and they wanted to educate the women so that there will be development in the society. So, but still, they couldn't change the challenge of the patriarchal structure in the society, but they could question gender discrimination. Okay, so actually, uh, they were uh, they were taking up issues that were pointed out by the colonizers, and they also used the colonizers' ideals and ideas in uh, in what they believed to empower women. And also, there were many women organizations that were working towards the empowerment of women. But most of the women's organizations were run by the wives and sisters of the social reformers. So they blindly did what the reformers asked them or bid them to do. So they accepted whatever the social reformers said without questioning. And so we can say that they were speaking the male language defined by male parameters. So it was men uh, who were dictating what should be done for women's liberation. So there was not real liberation at that juncture. So even now women, no, educated women are there. Even now you can see that women are not powerful. Maybe she's a CEO of a multinational company, but her decision making in the family will be done by only the male member, and she will have no role to do. Even financially independent, you can observe that in our society, even today, most of the ATM cards of these working women who are in high positions are still with the husband, and even financially, they cannot take any decision. So this is the situation, and also women are made to believe that they are physically weak. So these things were not conveyed to women, which will lead to real empowerment. So education alone would not equip them to be self-sufficient and independent. And actually, the education should help them to train themselves professionally, and also, but 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 education now was training them to become better housewives and mistresses of home. So this is what was happening during this time. Then came Yes, during Gandhiji's time, Gandhiji was encouraging women to participate in politics, and so many women joined him in the Dandi March. But it is only though women participated in the political arena, they were not in the main front like men. Okay, they couldn't come to the front part or the powerful positions. Their work was only seen as an extension of their domestic work. The major or primary work of women were only the domestic front, and not in the though they were participating in political campaigns and political activities, they couldn't come to the forefront. Even the few women who were allowed in the front rank among women, they still felt isolated. They were not included in all the activities. They were the odd ones out. So these new colonial ideas actually pushed the women into a more traditional way of life, and it was felt that even if the woman moved from their traditional role, suppose if a woman moved from the traditional role and she behaved in a new way, then that woman uh, was considered as a woman who threatened our culture. So she was a cultural threat to our culture. So this is what happened. So though women participated in politics, their primary role was only in the domestic front. We have a great reformers like Raja Ram Mohan Roy, who argued that sati is not supported by the Shastras and it was female murder. And he talked a lot about polygamy, and he voiced for the equal rights, property rights for women. And then we had Rabindranath Tagore, who removed the legal disabilities for remarried women, okay, Hindu widows. He was for the Hindu Remarriage Act. he only brought that. Then he also was the reason. Okay, he strived to the establishment of girls' schools in various parts of the country. And we have Keshav Chandra Sen, who was no, he was instrumental in passing the Native Marriage Act even in 1872, which forbade early marriage
Yeah, one
because
time.
because boys under 18 and girls under 14 were not allowed to marry. So he wanted to say that only after 18 boys can marry and girls after 14 only can marry. And he also was against polygamy. Earlier, many men married many women. So that was also forbidden. And then he encouraged widow remarriage. He allowed for intercaste marriages, but uh, yes, then there was Chandra Vidyasagar, who also fought against early marriage and supported literacy for women. So there were many social reformers, mostly men, who were striving for the emancipation of women, but it was not a real emancipation. Gandhiji, like Gandhiji says, no, it is good to swim in the waters. I quote Gandhiji: "It is good to swim in the waters of tradition, but to sink in them is suicide." Tradition is important. We have to uphold our tradition and culture, but sinking blindly into that is like suicide. And he wanted to create a balance between modern ideals and the traditional ideals. And so this is how these social reformers were fighting. Besides this, Sarojini Naidu and Kamala Devi Chattopadhyay and thousands of women also joined them in the freedom struggle. And Durga Bai, she organized women of Madras to forward to propagate ideals of Congress. And then all these women participation was there, but unfortunately they were all considered as an extension of their own domestic work. Then yes, Gandhiji was believing that women were non-violent by nature. They were never violent, and so he believed that their participation in the freedom struggle would help in always, even in emancipating the women. Yes, even in the emancipating and empowering of women. Nehru was acknowledging this, like I quote Nehru ji: "We talk of revolution, political and economic, yet the greatest revolution in our country is one that affects the status and living condition of its women." It was Gandhiji, that wonderful man and great revolutionary, who brought a dramatic change among our women when at his bidding they came out in large numbers from the shelters of their homes to take part in the struggle of India's freedom. Yes. Uh, so this is what Nehru was Nehruji's view. And the unfortunate thing is, most of the women, after the freedom struggle, no, once the freedom is accomplished, they were again pushed into the marginality. They were never given that much of equal rights in in the post-independent in India. But since they participated in the freedom struggle, they were given the right to vote, and they were also given equality in the Constitution of India. In Article 15 of 15.3, this empowers women, and they give special provisions for women. And then were a large number of policies, but unfortunately there was a wide gap between theory and practice. So when there were a lot of, after independence, Mother India was facing a lot of problems, like massive, okay, because of partition, communal violences, Kashmir war, economic dislocation, and all these problems, they were affecting women a lot. The most affected people were the women because of this. So because of years of colonial rule, indigenous practices indigenous food, crafts, all these were depleted, and I mean, they were destroyed, and even our natural resources were looted. So, this in this kind of a situation, women could not cope up with men, or they couldn't struggle or voice for their equality in such a situation. So, uh, so the myth of equality for women was shattered by a book by a report, Towards Equality report of 1974. Always people believed that there was equality for women, and women were privileged and all such things. But this myth was broken by this report, because despite many progressive social legislations and constitutional guarantees, women's status had not improved much. So this is what was the report, and that was it. That was true, because women were never really empowered. So in 21st century, women's movements were focusing on the three G's, like girl child, gender violence, and globalization. So these were the focus of women's movements in the 21st century, was on these three G's. So girl child, you can see that in 1901, the sex ratio was 972 for 1,000 males. But now we find that it is only 914 per thousand, and this shows a decline in the sex ratio, and this shows that our Indian society was giving more importance to boy children. And the gender roles were conceived, taught, and enacted within the family and society. So this is how a girl should behave in family or society. This was all conceived by men, and it was taught to the girl child. So the girl child, even before, from girl child was threatened.
Excuse me, ma'am. Your audio is not audible.
Okay. Okay. So, a girl child was throughout her life threatened, and she grows with a very low self-esteem. Uh, when we talk about women empowerment, the theory is that it's not education or any other laws that gives real empowerment to women, but it is her self-confidence and self-respect that gives her the real empowerment. And but unfortunately, a girl child is brought with low self-respect or self-esteem, and so she doesn't have much confidence to face the challenges in the outside world. And even media also reinforces stereotype gender roles, and so even if there is a traditional saying that a girl child is like ghee, a girl child or ghee, both, if they are they are good to some point, but if use them within a particular time, they start stinking. So this actually is very derogatory saying, because here a girl child is seen as a person who holds the household drudgery, and her role is to reproduce. So only at so her reproductive age is the age which is considered as good, and even that there it doesn't stop. She should be able to produce a son. That is another demand of the society. So so these things are obstacles in the forward movement of a girl child. So these things need to be analyzed, and some solution has to be found out. Then there is gender violence, where in South Asia we have gender violence regardless of income, status, class, and all those things. Any woman, even if she is educated, even if she is from a very rich family, there is gender violence. She has to face this. And but before that, if gender violence is considered as a private affair, okay, most of the people say that this domestic violence or gender violence is a private affair and shouldn't be taken to the public. And When it is not taken to the public, it means that you cannot understand gender violence in totality, because it also has an economic, social, and political cost to society, and it is never a private affair. Girl children should know to voice out against gender violence, domestic violence. So, upper caste dominance and capitalism, these things contribute more and more, create more and more violence against women. So, and even the social and family setup also, they don't let women go public about their domestic violence or gender violence. So, violence as such, we can take it as three. There are three types of violence. One is within home, that is domestic violence. Violence in public, where maybe workplace like rape, molest, sexual harassment at workplace, and all those things. And there is also violence perpetrated by the state, where the customs and traditions are prioritized over the fundamental freedom that a woman should be enjoying. So these gender violence are they come out examples of gender violence are dowry death, marital rape, harassment at the workplace. But most of the women are not allowed to speak about all these humiliation and violence that they encounter. And due to that, this kind of violence is on uh, the rate of this kind of violence is high, and still now we can see that women face a lot of problems. And due to the geographical proximity in South Asian countries, we have relatively open international borders, and so sex trafficking or women trafficking is predominant in South Asia. And due to liberalization also, the traditional means of livelihood has diminished, and all these things have a direct impact on women's development. So today's feminism is very relevant, and we need to talk about this. And as I'm talking about this kind of feminism, it's actually post-colonial feminism, which should be integrating the differences of the interdependent world. There should be equity, gender equity, and we should all listen to the voices of women from different cultural backgrounds, and they also should be included in the mainstream feminism. Actually, no, feminism and post-colonial feminism, when we talk about that, feminism, it was developed as a result of the experiences of women in Western cultures and former colonies. Generally, as women, what are the problems we face? But we have certain things, okay, certain differences in like in race, then political, economic, and cultural effects that have an impact on the problems faced, that give unique problems to women who belong to the non-white communities or the non-Western communities. So only this post-colonial feminism emerged, and it says that we women, the women of the third world countries, cannot be termed as women as such, but we have other differences. We have other differences. We have differences in class, race, ethnicity, or even by sexual preference. So post colonial feminism will be talking about it was started fundamentally as a critique for both Western feminism and post-colonial theory. Even post-colonial theories, they were talking about the lingering impacts of colonialism that it had on the economic and political institutions of the countries, but it never addressed the issues of gender and the problems faced by the women in these post-colonial countries. So these post-colonial feminisms, they want to address that, and they came out with their own volume of writings where they had to undergo double colonization or triple suppression, you can say. Double colonization in the sense that they had to suffer the impact of colonization and also patriarchy. So we have a lot of post-colonial feminists like Audrey Lord, who contributed a lot in post-colonial feminism. Her essay, "The Master's Tools Will Never Dismantle the Master's House." The Master's tools will never dismantle the Master's house. She uses the metaphor of Master's tools and Master's house to explain how Western feminism fails to make a positive change in the lives of the third world women by using the same kind of tools that they use for their own, used by the patriarchy to oppress women. She says that the same way, in the same way that patriarchy was affecting the feminists of the third world countries, the same way the white feminists were also affecting them. So her essay, "The Master's Tools Will Never Dismantle the Master's House," is a wonderful essay which you can read. And then Chandra Talpade Mohanty, she's a theorist at the moment. She in her essay asserts that Western feminists write about third world women as singular construction that is arbitrary and limiting. Just like just only on the basis of gender, she was writing, and she says that these women are depicted in writings as victims of masculine control and of traditional culture without incorporating information about historical context and cultural differences with the third world. So she says that they should include all these things. And Western feminism, feminists, they accuse the post-colonial feminism, saying that by forming different small groups, even among feminists, they were weakening the feminist movement, and so they wanted to wanted the post-colonial feminists to consider that women are a homogeneous lot. But post-colonial feminism counter-argued that you can include even the issues of class, race, ethnicity, and culture in their ideals, in the mainstream feministic ideals. They wanted to include all these things, which they have not. And then we have a lot of feminists. There were many, most of the post-colonial feminists, they say that though the Western feminists were talking about this patriarch male domination and the kind of oppression that they were giving, with no regard for the cultural or the traditional practices, they say that there are women who still wanted to adhere to their traditional and cultural practices, like the Islamic feminism, where they feminists talk about, they advocate the practice of gender mutilation and the wearing of scarves or veil. So they say that they regard wearing veil and gender mutilation as part of their culture, and they do not want to deviate from that. And so post-colonialism, when we talk of post-colonialism, we have various experiences, like various experiences from the colonial rule, because after colonial rule, there was a lot of migration, slavery, oppression, resistance, difference in race, gender, place, and certain imperialistic cultural practices. And so these kinds of things were addressed in the post-colonial writings. The post-colonial feminists see that there is a parallel between the reason. Okay, where exactly does this post-colonial start from, the regime or the post-colonial writings? Where can we fix the time of the emergence of post-colonial writing? Because post-colonial means when the colonial rule ends, it is post-colonial. This is the argument. So post-colonial feminists see, they ask, when does the post-colonial begin? So because recently also there were some countries which gained independence. So they see that the women were were living in a patriarch society. They were socially marginalized group with a dominant culture. So both feminism and post-colonialism has the similar goal of giving voice to the voiceless. That is okay. But when these traditional cultures and uh, uh, practices and patriarchy, they affect women, this kind of issues were never mentioned in the post-colonial writings. So what I would like to say is post-colonial feminists, they wanted the problems of women faced uh, by the impact of colonization and also the patriarchy, the patriarchal hierarchy, because of certain cultural and traditional practices. They wanted to have a balance, and they wanted um, to have an uh, um, see, they wanted to come out of all these things. They wanted the mainstream feminists to address these issues also in their writing. We have a lot of post-colonial feminist writes. I would like to introduce a few writers who were giving a voice to the sufferings of the women in post-colonial uh, countries. So we have the first is Toni Morrison. Most of us know Toni Morrison. She is a Nobel laureate, and she belongs to the African American community. And her novels are marked by strong women characters who were voiced against the patriarchal and racist society. And her works like Beloved, which is a slave narrative, it employs stream of consciousness style of writing, talking about the impact of race and patriarchy on a woman's life. Song of Solomon is also a linear narrative where the protagonist is a male, and it explores the relationship between Mekanded, a grandson of a former slave, and her Bluest Eye and Sula are also equally powerful writings. Then we have Audrey Lord, as I talked. Her writings talk about ingrained sexism, racism, and homophobia. She will be talking about the female body in her writings, and she calls herself a Black lesbian mother warrior poet. And her autobiography, Zami, it traces the life of a young blind girl and explores the themes of isolation, lesbianism, and disability. And I think Zami is a good work, I think, which can be taken up by research scholars for the study. Sister Outsider, and it's a collection of her speeches and essays, and her poetry collection is The Black Unicorn. These all talk about racial and sexual binaries. And we have Jean Rees. She's a post-colonial writer, and her novel Wide Sargasso Sea. It's a work which dismantles binaries of barbarity and civilization, and madness and rationality, and always this is associated with the racial other. Okay. So this is also one good work where there is a lot of scope for exploration, research exploration. Nawal Sadawi. She is also called as the Margaret Bower of the Arab world. She is an Egyptian feminist author. She attacks religious fundamentalism in the Middle East, which is the root of all kinds of oppression of women. She speaks against female genital mutilation and veiling, that is, wearing the parda. Her novel, The Fall of the Imam, which is an Arabic work translated into English by her own husband. It explores the life of the tyrant Imam and how he brutally lynches a woman. Then we have Flora Naupa. She is also a very good writer from Africa. She is one of the first women publishers in the continent. And you should also know that post-colonial feminist writings were not allowed to be published. That was also a kind of marginalization faced by the writers. And it was certain publications started by women themselves that helped them, that women came together and started publishing their work. So Nwapa's stories are matrifocal. It focuses on the strong spirit of women protagonists under the rules. Okay, they defy tradition. Actually, this is a radical work where they marry outside the community against the tradition, and they also marry with no, they gain the upper hand in marriage because of their financial acumen. And these stories depict the inversion of the gender role, okay, of gender roles. Like men are prostitutes and the kept men. Women control the finances, and the dominant and they are dominant in sexual relationships. So, as a rebellion against patriarchy and cultural and colonial domination, her writings defy all these conventions. Then we have Chimamanda Adichie. She's a very young Nigerian author, and she is famous for her TED talk called "We Should All Be Feminists." You can listen to that talk; it's really good. And her Half of an Yellow Sun explores the relationship between two Nigerian twin sisters face to face with their patriarchal family and lovers in the post and pre and post-war torn Nigeria. Then she also talks about how the Igbo community is destroyed, and her talk yes. And her other novels like Purple Hibiscus and Americana, they also talk about, they have very powerful female protagonists who try to reconcile personal relationship even when there is a unstable political scenario there. Then Alice Walker is, everyone knows Alice Walker, and her prize-winning novel is The Color Purple, where which traces the journey of Celie, a very God-fearing woman who is raped by her own stepfather and forcibly married to a stranger. And it's about Celie's transformation into an economically, mentally, and socially independent woman who comes to terms with her sexuality, and she searches for a long-lost sister. So here also sexual violence, the novel addresses themes like sexual violence, arbitrariness of law, repression of female sexuality, and also the need to question oppression. Her collection of essays, In Search of Our Mother Garden, Rose, is very powerful, and it gives an insight into Walker's sexual politics, and also how she is the one who coined the term womanism as against feminism. And she has also written novels like Possessing the Secret of Joy and Color Purple. All these talk about facial scarring and mutilation, which were part of their traditional culture or rituals, and how they overcame all those things. Then we have Uruashi Bhutalia. She is a feminist author and publisher, and an Indian. Her famous work is The Other Side of Silence, which talks about the women survivors of the partition, where they had to face double violence both during the exodus, both from the enemy community and also their own guardians, or like the family members, fathers, brothers, husband, who all killed them in the name of honor. No, you must have heard of honor killing. So these kinds of violence these women had to face, and these are reflected in her book, The Other Side of Silence. And then it also talks about, it's a reminder of all religious, racial, and political conflict, and all because of, and all these conflicts, in all these conflicts, women are the victims. So this is also a post-colonial, she's also a post-colonial feminist author. And then we have Mahashweta Devi, whose story collection, The Breast Stories, it was translated by Gayatri Spivak, and it talks about patriarchy, where the breast is a symbol of, or the motive of empowerment in all the stories. And she narrates the stories of women who were, three women who were oppressed in varying degrees in the patriarchal society. All the women come from the marginalized society, marginalized sections of the society, and then these tales also reflect how power plays in the dynamics of sex, economics, and culture, and how women are tyrannized by all these things. So these are some of the writers that I wanted to introduce. And then one other thing is, yes, so when I was talking about post-colonialism, I wanted to share some more things. There were, yeah, I was talking about girl children, and you can watch that film Slumdog Millionaire, which shows how the gap between the rich and poor is large, and how women face a lot of problem. Especially girl children face a lot of problem in the society, and the family is another place where uh, women are suppressed in the name of family as preservers of culture and tradition. So these kinds of issues needs to be addressed, and these kinds of issues were addressed by the post-colonial feminists. Uh, and so I would say that in the 21st century, though we may claim that women are given all kinds of privileges and privileges, whether it's legal or policy-wise, or even if the women are educated with all kinds of social and economic advancements, people may think that there is no relevance for feminism, but always one should remember that women still face problems in spite of all these advancements, in both inside the home and outside their homes. And the need of the hour is that they should know how to regain their self-respect and self-confidence, and that gender equity is necessary for the future world. And these things should be made aware to the women around outside, and only then the women can empower themselves. And the women, post-colonial feminist writers, they expose all these things. Uh, they expose the sufferings of the women, and also give solution to how a woman can empower herself in the 21st century, that too in a post-colonial country, where the impacts of colonialism had actually degraded the traditional and cultural practices, and both even the traditional cultural practices formulated by the male members of the society were oppressing the women. So the women should come out with self-respect and self-confidence to empower or overcome all these practices. And the post-colonial feminist writers have done justice in that way. And I would suggest that all scholars can take up new avenues, new writers. I was talking about a few writers and their works. You can read that, like Zami by Audrey Lord. I am quite interested in that autobiography. So take up new areas, new writings for your research and explore them from a feministic perspective in the research, in your research. Thank you once again, all of you, for your patient listening, and thank you, the organizers, for giving me such a wonderful opportunity to share some of my uh, readings or knowledge with the scholarly audience. Thank you.